The call comes at 4:47 inches the morning, and it isn't from your family. It's from the Bossiege coordinator in your neighborhood, the one with the thin mustache and the laminated ID card he shows you every time, like it means something different than it did the month before. You've been assigned to a mobilization point in South Tehran by 0600. You don't ask which front. You already know you won't get a real answer. You're 22 years old, and you've been through the ideological training, the marching, the Friday sermons where the cleric described martyrdom the way a travel agent describes a beach resort. You believed some of it. Not all of it, but enough to be here, lacing up boots that don't fit right, in a courtyard that smells like diesel and anxiety. Then the announcement comes through a phone, not the state broadcast, not an official channel. Someone's cracked screen showing a telegram message from a channel you're not supposed to follow. Khamenei is dead. Cardiac arrest, they say, though you'll hear 7 different versions of that story before the week is out. You look at the faces around you, the other recruits, the low-level besiege volunteers, the kid from Mashhad who won't stop repeating prayers under his breath, and you understand something fundamental in this moment. Nobody knows who gave the last order. Nobody knows if the order you're standing under right now is still valid. But you stay in line, because leaving the line is the only thing you're certain would be wrong. 3 weeks in, and you've learned the first real rule of the IRGC. The ideology is the uniform, but the loyalty is to the man directly above you. Not to the supreme leader, not anymore. Not with that seat empty and 3 factions already maneuvering in Tehran, like pieces on a board that hasn't decided its own rules yet. To the man above you. His name is Captain Davuti, and he has a scar that runs from his left ear to his jaw from a Mosul operation in 2016 that he never talks about directly but references constantly in metaphor. You learn to read him the way you'd read weather. When he goes quiet at briefings, something is being decided above his pay grade, and he doesn't like the answer. When he drinks his tea standing up, the day is going to be long and probably loud. You're stationed at a logistics relay point near the Iraqi border, and the word filtering down is that the Western command structure is operating in a partial vacuum because 3 of the top IRGC generals are in Tehran right now, not at their posts, positioning themselves for whatever succession crisis is crystallizing in the capital. Your job is to move supplies, log manifests, and not ask questions about the crates that don't get logged. There are always crates that don't get logged. You develop a skill in this level that you'll use for the rest of your life. You learn to look at a situation and instantly calculate which version of events you're supposed to believe out loud versus which version you're allowed to know privately. These are almost never the same version. You make $380 a month in official salary. You make an additional $200 in informal payments that Davuti distributes from a lockbox he keeps in his vehicle. No paperwork, no record, no conversation about what it's for. You take it. You eat better that week than you have in months. And you understand now that the revolution has always run on 2 parallel ledgers, the one for God and the one for everyone actually keeping the lights on. You get transferred at month 5, not because you did anything wrong, but because someone above Davuti noticed that you were calm under pressure and good with numbers. In the IRGC, those 2 qualities together mean one thing. They put you in the logistics and procurement division of the Quds Forces Administrative Wing, not the field operations side, not yet the side that handles the movement of resources across borders in ways that standard military accounting doesn't fully capture. Your new superior is a colonel named Shirazi, who wears civilian clothes more than uniform and takes calls in Farsi, Arabic, and occasionally Russian. The war itself is being fought on 4 fronts simultaneously, but the war you're now inside of is being fought on approximately 40 fronts, most of which have no official name. You're managing transfer documents for equipment moving through Syria, through Iraq, through channels that exist in the gap between what 2 governments officially acknowledge and what they privately permit. The numbers you handle in a single week exceed what your father earned in his entire career as a schoolteacher. None of it is yours. All of it passes through your hands. You become very precise and very careful and very good at not having opinions. The succession crisis in Tehran has produced a temporary leadership council, 3 clerics, 2 generals, and a bureaucrat from the Expediency Council whom nobody trusts but everyone needs, and the directives coming down are contradictory in ways that require you to develop a personal filtering system. You follow the orders that have Colonel Shirazi's name attached. You file the others. The psychological shift at this level is subtle but permanent. You stop thinking about the war in terms of winning and losing. You start thinking about it in terms of which structures survive and which ones collapse, and how to make sure you're attached to the ones that survive. This is not cynicism, you tell yourself. This is how things actually work. 8 months into the war, you're a captain on paper and something harder to name in practice. You have a team of 11 people, a vehicle fleet, and access to 3 separate communication channels that don't route through normal IRGC signals infrastructure. The supreme leadership vacuum has been partially filled by a council that's real in public statements and mostly theater in operational reality. The actual decisions are being made by a cluster of Quds Force senior commanders, who've effectively become a military junta without using that word. You work for one of those commanders now. Brigadier General Hosseini, 61 years old, built like a man who stopped being afraid of physical consequences sometime in his 40s, with a reputation built across Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Gaza over 3 decades of operations the public will never fully know about. He doesn't explain things. He gives you an outcome and expects you to produce the architecture that achieves it. The first time he tells you to make something disappear, a financial trail connected to a weapons shipment that went wrong in a way that would implicate 2 different factions in Tehran, you take 48 hours to figure out how. You figure it out. He says nothing when you deliver, but the next week, your name appears on a list it was not on before, and 2 doors that were closed to you are now open. That's the currency here. Not money, not rank, access. You start to notice who gets access and who gets managed, and you categorize every person you meet within 30 seconds of meeting them. You stop being friends with people and start having relationships with people, which is different in ways that you don't examine too closely. Your family calls less because you're harder to reach. You tell yourself it's temporary. A year in, and the war has settled into something more durable and more corrosive than the initial explosive months. The front lines have hardened. The political situation in Tehran has produced a provisional supreme leader, a compromise candidate who has authority on paper and pressure from every direction in reality, and the IRGC's internal factions have used the chaos to consolidate resources, territory, and influence in ways that will take years for anyone outside to map. You are now a fixer. That's not your title. Your title is Senior Coordination Officer, Logistics and Strategic Resources. But what you actually do is resolve problems that shouldn't exist but do, using methods that shouldn't be discussed but are, for people who shouldn't need to ask but have to. You move between military, intelligence, and economic worlds the way a lawyer moves between courtroom and backroom, understanding that the real work almost never happens in the official space. You clear $85,000 in a 6-month period through a procurement arrangement in Iraq that involves 3 shell companies and a Lebanese intermediary who takes 15% and asks for nothing else, which is the most professional behavior you've encountered since the war started. None of it touches your official record. You have an apartment in Tehran now, in addition to your operational billet, and the apartment has furniture that your official salary couldn't explain. You've stopped explaining it, even to yourself. The psychological cost at this level is a specific kind of loneliness. You know too much to talk to most people, and the people you can talk to are all calculating their position relative to yours every time you sit in the same room. Trust has become a tactical assessment, not a feeling. You don't notice when it stops feeling like a loss. 18 months into the war, your name carries weight in rooms you've never entered. You've never given a speech. You've never appeared in a newspaper. You have no official title that explains what you actually do. But 3 different mid-level commanders in 3 different provinces have called your private line in the past month to ask for guidance on problems they couldn't bring to their direct superiors, and you've given them guidance, and they followed it, and the problem's resolved. That's authority. Not the kind that gets announced, but the kind that gets used. General Hosseini has been elevated to a position on the Provisional Defense Council, which means he's less available and more powerful simultaneously, and his elevation has transferred a significant portion of his operational authority downward to you, in practice, even if 4 people officially sit above you on the org chart. Those 4 people know it. You know it. Nobody says it. This is how the IRGC has always worked. There's the structure on paper, and there's the structure in practice. And the gap between them is where real power lives and where real danger lives in equal measure. You've had to make 2 decisions in the past 3 months that resulted in outcomes that you don't think about when you're trying to sleep. Not because they were wrong by the logic of the system, because they were exactly right by the logic of the system. And the system's logic and your original logic have now fully merged in ways you can no longer separate. You are the system now, in a way you weren't before. You feel it most clearly when a subordinate looks at you, the way you used to look at Devuti, reading your silences, cataloging your moods, trying to stay close to your warmth and away from your shadow. You remember being that person. The memory is accurate but distant, like a fact about someone else's life. 2 years in, and the war has changed shape 4 times, but not ended. The Provisional Supreme Leader has consolidated enough support to be declared permanent, which means the succession crisis is officially over and unofficially ongoing in the form of every faction that backed a different candidate now repositioning for the next decade. You are a senior figure in one of the most powerful of those factions, though your name appears in no public document connecting you to it. You have a team of 43 people across 5 countries. You have relationships with 3 foreign intelligence services that are the enemies of the Islamic Republic in official policy and indispensable operational partners in quiet reality. You have solved problems for people powerful enough to end your career or your life, and they owe you for the solutions, and that debt is the most valuable thing you own. You travel on 4 different passports. None of them are in your birth name. The identity erosion that started at level 2 has reached its conclusion, not dramatic, not a breakdown, just a slow and total replacement, the way a river carves a canyon, one day at a time, until there's no original rock face left to point to. You receive intelligence one Thursday afternoon that a rival faction is planning to use a parliamentary investigation to expose financial structures connected to your network. You don't panic. You spend 72 hours making 14 phone calls and 1 in-person meeting in a parking structure in northern Tehran, and by Sunday, the investigation has been redirected toward a different target. You eat dinner with your mother on Sunday evening, and she talks about your father's health and asks when you're going to get married, and you answer her questions with the same face you use for everything now. She thinks you seem tired. She's not wrong, but she's also not right about what kind of tired. 3 years after the Supreme Leader died on the first day of the war, you sit in an office that doesn't officially exist, in a building that officially houses an agricultural export firm, and you read a morning summary that covers more real intelligence than most sitting ministers receive. You are not a minister. You hold no official rank above colonel on the paper trail that auditors can find. But 3 generals call you before making decisions, one of whom helped orchestrate the political transition that ended the succession crisis, and another of whom controls IRGC operations across the entire Western theater of the war. You are 51 people's direct problem solver, and approximately 200 people's distant, unnamed ceiling. The war has partially frozen, not a peace, but a managed pause, the kind that requires constant, invisible maintenance from people like you to keep from reigniting in ways that benefit no one holding power. Your job now is not operations. Your job is architecture. You design the structures financial, informational, relational, that allow the system to function across administrations, across reshufflings, across the deaths and departures of any individual leader. You made the system less dependent on any one man, which means you made it more durable, which means you made it more dangerous, and you know this with a clarity that changes nothing. The cost of this level is not danger. The danger mostly lives below you now, absorbed by the layers of people between you and direct consequence. The cost is that you can no longer locate a version of yourself that exists outside of the function you perform. You can remember wanting things, a life, a family, a feeling of being known by someone who isn't calculating what you're worth to them. Those aren't regrets. They're archived data. You feel most alive when a complex problem arrives, and you can see the solution before anyone else in the room, and you feel something else entirely in the hours between midnight and 4 a.m., when the work isn't there to fill the space. You have learned not to spend much time in those hours. You keep the work close. It's the most honest relationship you have. The return, level 1, again. Somewhere in a courtyard in South Tehran, a 22-year-old is lacing up boots that don't fit right. His phone has a telegram message on it he's not supposed to have read, from a channel he's not supposed to follow, telling him something about the leadership structure above him that changes everything about what he thought he was signing up for. He's looking at the faces around him, trying to figure out if anyone else knows. He thinks the confusion is temporary. He thinks once things stabilize, once the structure clarifies, once the real leadership emerges and the chain of command settles, he'll understand what he's actually part of. He thinks this is an interruption in the system. He doesn't know that this is the system. He doesn't know that the instability is the architecture. He doesn't know that the gap between what the structure claims to be and what it actually is, that gap is the most important real estate in the entire organization, and there are men who have spent decades building rooms inside it that he will never be allowed to enter and will spend the next years of his life trying to find. He will find them, or he won't. If he does, he'll learn the rules, the real ones, the ones that never appear in the ideology, the ones that get passed sideways in parking structures and across late-night tea in offices that officially don't exist. He'll trade pieces of himself for each rule he learns. He'll tell himself it's worth it. He might even be right. He straightens up when the sergeant calls the line to attention. He doesn't look afraid. He should. Not because of what's coming in the war. Because of what's coming after he survives it. You were him once. You remember the boots that didn't fit. You don't remember what it felt like to not know the rest. Somewhere, a new level 1 just began. He thinks he understands what he's walking into. He doesn't. But he will.